Hi, this video is about strategies to deepen learning during remote learning. It's not going to be a whole bunch of answers, but hopefully a useful overview of places you may want to consider in your practice to develop the student work they're producing and they're learning during the lockdown period. I wish to start with this quote from Ron Berger. It says, "Self-esteem comes from accomplishment, not from compliments." I think this is particularly important during remote learning. Some students are struggling, and one way we can make them feel better about themselves and their own abilities is by allowing them to achieve highly. I think this comes from many different areas in our practice. First of all, we need students to consider taking a risk in what we ask them to produce. We need to find a way of challenging them. Students need to have some kind of choice and an opportunity to do something that they think has value, something of quality. To do this, they will need an opportunity to spend a significant amount of time on this piece of work, and maybe even produce one or two drafts before the final piece of work is submitted. So they really have an opportunity to invest in the quality of their learning and their work in this piece of work. So the piece of work itself turns into a focus for us and therefore our planning. Quality work obviously needs quality assessment. So how are your students going to get feedback on the quality of their work? Well, one way is by starting it with exemplars or models of high quality work where they can see the direction that they're headed in. And that will help us provide clear success criteria. We know that within teams there is the rubric function, and this might be an opportunity for us to focus and practice with that tool we have at our disposal. So how will we know that we're being successful deepening student learning during this remote learning phase? So we could have students remembering more, or we could increase the amount of student independence or autonomy during that work, or the work the students produce has a greater level of sophistication, so it might contain more connections to other ideas, it might contain more key language from your subject area. So how do we go about having students remember more? So one strategy we might want to think about how we would do it in our normal classrooms and how we can then translate that into remote learning is the opportunity to practice with the material. How can we get the students to go over that material until they become fluent with it? We could use lots of low stakes quizzing so they get a chance to practice the process of remembering. I think some of the things I know I've been producing during remote learning has been very much focused on my delivery, how well I explain those ideas. Maybe what I've been less good at is helping the students recall that information. And remember, the memory is made up of those two parts, the storage part and the retrieval part. So in order to remember more, students need the opportunity to practice recalling. We also might want to take this opportunity to teach some study skills. So how do you make a whole part map? How do you make a concept map? How do you create a flowchart with that information? And again, this is something that students would need to practice to be good at that skill. But if we can think about what strategies might be particularly useful for our subjects, and then choose to teach that alongside some content, when students return, they'll have that skill at their disposal forevermore. Motivation is a key part to the learning process, especially when you're doing something as difficult as memorization. It shares a complex relationship with the processes of engaging in learning and its continuation. Notice in the metacognitive regulation triangle that motivation sits at the heart of the planning, monitoring and evaluation of learning. To help students, we may need to give them an opportunity to set their own goals, or at least negotiate what success would look like for them. We need to help them believe that they can do something and be successful. Although, I guess this is a difficult thing to do because we know that self-esteem is best served by, or through, accomplishment by the student. But to begin that process, we need to find a way of encouraging them to believe in themselves. And finally, how do we help students to check that they're making progress? How do we help them know that they have been successful in their own goals? I think key to this too is our checking of student understanding. So the chance for us to check that they know the basics, can apply the basics, and are getting praise and motivation from that all. Key planning questions for this kind of work might be thinking about what success criteria will be for the students. What will it look like for them? What will it feel like? How will they know that they've made progress? How will you show them that they're getting better at a particular subject? How will you know that they've made a movement from where they started the topic to where they currently are? Our second possible way of deepening student learning is to increase their independence or autonomy during the learning process. The ultimate aim for this is to increase the amount of thinking a student does during a lesson, so that the students will end up thinking more than the teacher during that spell. So again, the teaching of study skills alongside your content is a crafty way of achieving this. So it could be teaching them how to skim read. It could be teaching them how to create a summary. It could be teaching them how to use a concept mapping tool. All of these will add to the student's ability to study with less support. This will allow you to provide choice, so they can choose how to complete particular tasks. Remember, choice is a key motivating factor for us all. How we choose, how we go about doing something, we're more likely to be motivated to do it. To do this successfully, we will need to develop metacognitive awareness within our students. So this is an all-encompassing thing that they know how to study, and they know what strategies are going to work with what kind of content, so that they are aware of the choices they can make and make good decisions. Part of that is being able to control your own motivation. Can you help your students identify when they are lacking motivation and providing them some self-starting strategies so that they can take it from I'm not motivated to actually I believe I can do this. The other one is a much more teacher-centric view, and it's about how we scaffold work and then go about removing it. So it could be using a model to start off a lesson, then using a gap fill, and then sentence starters, and then allowing the students to complete the final part of the essay or the write-up or whatever it happens to be, totally independently, being guided by the work that came before. So key to this, in terms of planning for us, is we need to think about what content will serve us to allow the students to become more independent. And key to this, and this feeds back into this idea of metacognitive awareness, how do you help the students reflect on the process that they've been through? So is that a good focus for a follow-up lesson, a live lesson after they've handed in a bit of work and you've marked it and you've talked about, well, how did you go about doing it? That increases their opportunities for making good choices about the work that they do. So the third and final part of deepening student learning could come from the requirement for them to produce more sophisticated work. Now, key to this would be how much thinking they do in that work. So this is where scaffolding is going to be especially important, I think. Another way of making work more sophisticated is if we focus on literacy strategies which we teach the students. So it could be as simple as providing a greater list of connectors for the students to use. It could be a focus of your feedback, or it could be you actually modelling how to write successfully. So exemplar work will be a big part of this. Now this could be generated by you, the teacher, or could be generated by previous students. but the opportunity to pull that apart and show how it works and why it is good is a key part to encouraging students to first of all emulate that work and then do that on a more independent basis. Exemplar work is really good at deriving clear success criteria. So this is what it looks like. These are the things we're working towards. And if we've got success criteria, we're more likely to provide focused feedback to help students improve the quality of their work. Another part of this could actually come through either students collaborating on a piece of work, maybe using a breakout room in teams to talk about and work on a shared document, or could be setting up those rooms so that the students can give one another feedback on a piece of work before they turn it in to you, the teacher. So in terms of planning, we need to consider what work would be worthwhile the students doing multiple times. Does it contain big ideas that you definitely want them to practice and practice and practice? Is it something that you know is going to make them proud at the end of it? As part of this, we need to think about how often and how the students will receive feedback from their peers and from you, so that this work is something that they're genuinely proud of. So the first thing to do is just reflect on your normal classroom practice. What can you take from there and use in your remote teaching? It just could be on one feature that I've mentioned in the last 10 minutes or so. Second thing is, if you have tried something remotely and it's worked with your students, is there something that you can share with us all by making a small video, maybe compiling some student work and seeing how you went about getting the students to produce work of that quality or depth of understanding. And finally, what would you like to know more about? So I've mentioned a lot of things. Do you want to know a little bit more about how to scaffold? Do you want to learn a little more about metacognition? We really want to know what you would like to know more about in terms of producing more support for weeks going on from here. So the final thing to do is, please, there's a little form to fill in which looks pretty much or exactly like this. It's 3 simple questions. If you leave your response in there, then we can use that for planning. Thanks for listening. Bye.